Hey, with the music in the background, this is a follow companion video to having done a multiplication of polynomials, and I'll make one more for the division of polynomials once I know how to do that. What you want to remember that a polynomial is describing a shape, a function perhaps, or just a shape, a graph, and when you're multiplying, what you're doing is multiplying the shapes together. You are multiplying the values at any particular point. So if x is 1, then y might be 5 for one function, it might be 10 for the other, and the value of the multiplication would be 50. I'm introducing you, if you haven't seen it now, to a free app called Geogebra, and all we're going to do is a very quick input of those two functions that we did a second ago for when we multiplied them together, and we'll just learn to kind of play around with some of the stuff and realize it's not always so easy to master, but you'll learn it. You just start clicking around, and so this GeoGebra comes up laid out. It has different views. You can change the different types of axes and the like, so turn them on and off, polar coordinates, spherical coordinates, Cartesian coordinates. So we're going to input now the first function, which we said was 5x squared plus 3x plus 7. And you will see, if we can zoom out here, zooming out with the mouse, it actually graphs that function. So I'm kind of wheeling out, wheeling in, and we'll figure out a better way to get this to work. Typically, if you're grabbing, at some point you'll be able to move around. Alright, so this is actually graph that function, and you see that function as expected is a parabola. Now we can add another function and immediately put it as f of x, even though we didn't tell it. We can now do g of x is 2x squared minus 5x plus 15. This conversation came about, or these videos came about, from this discussion of how important factoring is, and I'm sure there's a lot of reasons why you got to learn to factor, but it's probably more important to realize that this is two functions. And now I'm going to go ahead and multiply as I did by pure algebra, and we're in GeoGebra, so you're immediately going to see the geometry or the shape. So all I need to do now is go down to the bottom and say f of x. Space usually in a lot of programs is going to be multiplication times the g of x. And you see that makes the h of x. And you don't see it here. That's because these values are scaling up and multiplying. And you see that there were no roots to either of these functions, no real roots to either of these functions. They'd never crossed the x-axis, so there was no root. But if you look, we're going to back out here a little bit and see if we can get down to and look for that function. And what we're going to do here in a second is we're going to go ahead and turn off, clicking off and off, see if we can still find that multiplied function. And there you have it. There's the multiplied function h of x, and I'll turn one other one on. You've got one multiplied by the other, and the other one as well, and so you can see how these tend to multiply up, so that out in this range, they're obviously it's so far up or high up you don't see it. That said, it's really not that interesting a graph when you think about it. It's just multiplying a parabola by a parabola. And the more interesting thing would be if we just go to this h of x and no longer keep it f of x times g of x, but f of x times. What I did is I double clicked in there. I'm going to hit OK. And now you see the division. And we did not demonstrate division, but we see that this is one function divided by the other, and we can then look at the inverse of that. If we think about it, we can make the inverse. I guess we can go ahead here, and we should be able to copy it, which we can't, but I can just make a new function now here. We're going to make a g of x divided by h of x. So we're going to take g of x divided by h of x. Somehow they're not telling you, and I'm going to turn these off, that this function is the inverse of that function. And there you see it. There's a bit of a shift around and the like. So inverse being something that multiply by the other. So if we take 1 multiplied by the other, this would actually equal 1. So the fact here of how one can go about using Geogebra to immediately, whether the teacher is doing it or not, to get some intuition and insight into when you are graphing functions, graphing points, and doing the like, with no cost except for access to a computer. Geogebra is a free app. There's many softwares that are like this. Geometry Sketchpad is killer cool. It's got some cost to it, but the reality here is that we have to start realizing with these starting in 2 dimensions that mathematical functions or relationships are describing shapes. Thanks for listening.